We'll call to order the Republican Caucus. We'll run through, do roll call. I am here.
Aaron Booker.
Fred Westcott.
How about on Zoom? Mike Zintak.
Here.
John Butita. I see him there.
I see him, I don't hear him.
Good enough. Paul Arena.
Here.
Dave Kelley.
Here.
And Steve Schultz.
I'm here.
We have a quorum for this evening. If it's okay with you guys, I want to start off quick. We've got a guest. We've got Paul Hoffman. He's running against Steidelman for Senate, and he would just like to stop and say hi for a moment. Paul, you want to introduce yourself and what you're about?
Hello, Paul Hoffman. I'm running in the race for Senate District 34 against Steve Steidelman. I chose to enter this race because I felt Steve Steidelman needed an opponent. My great concern for the state of Illinois. I have not run in a legislative race or political office before, although I have served as a precinct committeeman for over 20 years. And so that's how I entered the race. I put my name in, said I would be willing to run, and I was slated. We got went about getting the petitions during the COVID crisis. We got 2,500 signatures when we needed 1,000, and there were no objections filed. So we were encouraged by that, and now we're about getting my name recognized in the district. So my weakness in this race is name recognition, since I'm not a weatherman and on TV. So I'm just looking for all networks possible to get that word out. We'll provide flyers, of course, walking list, and that sort of coordination, working to get the name out. Plus, one of the reasons I entered this race was the Michigan strategy to really increase the Republican majority and get Donald Trump elected, was fill every slot with a candidate, even if it didn't look likely that you would win. But that was one of the drivers for entering this race. So that's pretty much it. I'm a conservative Republican, both socially and fiscally. I would like to, several positions are freeze spending immediately, be a voice for that. One thing I've talked about as far as state pensions, there was a Wall Street article about freezing the increases as a way to heal the pensions over time. I know that's a touchy subject, but it's an avenue to try to get us away from junk status. I tell people right now we're borrowing from the Federal Reserve because the interest rate we can get is, the latest one was 5.85%. So we have to solve our fiscal issues. And education, I have been talking to principals of high schools and school board members, charter school principal. Really, we need to get the state out of controlling local decisions. So it's reducing state mandates, especially when they don't have funding behind them, as part of my interest to support education. Like to throw it up for any questions or.
What's your personal background, Ben? What do you do?
Okay, that's a good question. I graduated from University of Michigan, Dearborn as an electrical engineer, worked at Sunstrand for 40 years. I was an electrical engineer and engineering manager there. A lot of problem solving, and that's one of the skills I think I bring to this office, is looking at complicated problems, getting people together to propose solutions. So that's my career experience.
Nice.
Very good.
I'm a 30-year Sunstrand employee.
I recognize that. I recognize the Smith to the right. Yes.
Hey, look at here.
Let the record reflect Jazz Billich is now here. I see Jean Crosby's trying to log in. She says she's having trouble logging in though. Anyone in Zoom have questions for Mr. Hoffman? Looks like none. Anybody here?
If I could just make a brief comment.
Sure.
What we're looking for, to be honest with you, is what we have been able to do this time is combine the activities of several Republican candidates to share volunteer bases. And Paul can describe what his district looks like size-wise, but we really need people who have a volunteer base to help him along the way too. Again, we're trying to increase the Republican presence, so that will help those of you who are up also in your districts. So by using that coordinated effort, we got a whole lot better shot at having a success all the way across the board. So any way you can contact me or he, as far as how we can build that volunteer base up, if you've got people you know that live in his district or know people in the district who could help us out, that would be a heck of a benefit to both you and him.
Sure. Thank you. Excellent.
I believe we've got an event tomorrow night at Gambino, with Ron McCray.
Oh,
Is that tomorrow night, I think?
yeah, I'm not going to be at that one. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I want to get to, it's a weekly event, right?
I think so. I haven't been there. They've invited me and several other Republican, whether they're involved in the Republican committee, Winnebago County Republican Central Committee, or they're Republican elected officials in Winnebago County. I thought it was a meet and greet of Paul Hoffman, but I think we're just going to get there and discuss.
I haven't been notified.
Oh,
I haven't either. I've been to that event a couple times, and it's a general discussion on conservative
general
values.
discussion, right?
And so it's made that approach. Some of the members also work with the WCRC. Others don't. So it's just it's a group of people that pull more people in to talk about conservative issues.
Okay.
Excellent. Anybody else questions for Mr. Hoffman before he leaves?
I wanted to mention just for the meeting tonight that I can hear you very well, Mr. McDonald. I heard Mr. Hobson, but I could not hear his associate. If you lean toward the speaker, then we're going to hear you. But if you're sitting back, we're probably not going to hear you.
Very good. Thank you. Basically, we're looking for, if you've got volunteer bases. Oh, there's the speaker. There we go. Basically, what we're looking for some help with is we're doing coordinated efforts as far as campaigns go right now in the Republican Party. We're looking for volunteer bases. So if you have some folks in Paul's area, or people who know folks in Paul's area, he's built up an incredible volunteer base at this point already. But name recognition, battling the Stadelman juggernaut, name-wise, is going to be a challenge, and we're working on it hard. Any help you can come forward with would be a really big benefit to us.
Yeah.
We also will tell you we've done the breakout as far as voters and Republicans versus Democrats in that district, and we got a heck of a shot at this. We really do. It's a lot closer than anybody thought. So if the effort's put in, and Paul's working really hard at it, if the effort's put in, we got a shot to kind of turn things upside down a little bit. And so that's what we're encouraging. If you can help us out with that, we'd like to help out your campaigns also, obviously. And my name's Larry Bauer. I'm an old face. So we'll just leave that. Hope you could hear that, Paul.
Steve.
Sorry. Oh, Steve Schultz, Steve, son of a gun. That's the guy who replaced me.
Oh, you were thinking that Paul Arena's name was under
Yep.
Steve's picture. Yeah. Okay.
No, Steve was a fellow who, after Webster, replaced me. So.
Oh, yeah.
So is there a particular contact our volunteer coordinator or could contact from the caucus to, network?
I've been speaking with Larry,
Okay.
so he's got my contact information.
Okay. So through Larry. Okay. Good.
So anything you can do, we'd appreciate it. And if we can be there for you, let us know too.
Very good.
And we appreciate you giving us a chance to speak. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, this is great. This is good. Thank you.
Can I leave some paraphernalia? How much?
Yeah.
How much is appropriate?
I'll be doing walking myself.
More in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a few.
You're out of my district, or I'm out
Yeah,
of your
you're out.
district, so I'm trying to think where else.
Okay. Just, and if you know people, we're asking people who know people within Rockford, let them know that I'm in the race. That's,
Yeah, I think you're in the right place at the right time with Steve Stadelman's record of supporting just about everything that Mike Madigan. It's been very, very negative with that name. So you may be in the right place, right time, and it's good and refreshing to hear somebody with that problem-solving background stepping up and for the challenge. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge. More difficult problems than working on airplanes at times. With lots of people issues.
Great. Well, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for
Thank you, guys.
having me. Thank you.
Take care, Larry.
Yep, you too.
All right, we'll move on down the county board agenda. John Butita, do you see that you have the invocation for Thursday night? You're aware?
No, but thank you. I'll be prepared.
That's why I mentioned, I showed up
Good
once and
idea.
I was very, and I don't like getting surprised about that. I like to put a little thought into it prior. It's like Miss Crosby's having better luck now.
Ah, no
So-
kidding. Thank you.
All right, move down. I think the first stop is the unfinished business. Is there any new action or anybody want to talk about the 4 appointments? Is there any discussion to be had on those? Everybody comfortable?
We're gonna continue doing them the same way. At the point,
Leave them on the table.
leave them on the table.
Mr. Kelley and the cat.
I think we ought to take them off the table.
Duly noted, sir. I thank you. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll move down to standing committee reports, finance. Mr. Schultz, normally I run down finance. Could you help me out this time? Are you prepared for that? You're still on mute, sir.
No, I don't mind walking through those items. Just bear with me a moment here. If I tip my head up, it's because of the bifocal situation now at this stage of life. So we've got
I have
the,
that.
we've got the mental health, kind of the next step of the $45,000 that was previously approved. It had to be put in the form of a budget amendment. So that's coming forward. We have the sheriff's $2.7 million budget amendment. We have the acquisition contracts related to the installment purchases, and that is just the actual purchase of the $450,000 worth of equipment for the firewalls for the IT department. Again, we already approved that in its initial form, but then now this is the specific purchase contracts, and it came in at exactly the amount that we approved. So they must have had some insight ahead of time on that one. Then we have the resolution that was brought forward by Mr. Arena, myself, and Mr. Salgado regarding finding offsetting either revenue or budget reductions for the sheriff's budget amendment. And then finally, there's 2021 fiscal year budget information that's going to be discussed with the board. And I'm anticipating that'll be Steve Chapman. And that's
I
it.
would agree. Is there any questions for Mr. Schultz on those items? You have your hand up, Mr. Arena? I can't tell it's shadow. Yeah, Mr. Arena. Go ahead, Paul.
Muted.
Okay, thanks. So on the resolution that we had, finding a funding source for the budget amendment and for the sheriff's budget amendment, what I would like to see happen is that we lay over the sheriff's budget amendment until we can work on that funding source piece of the puzzle. During finance, Mr. Salgado brought up what they had done when he was with the Park District with a community survey to get a sense for the, the community's desire on, what they wanted as far as Park District services. And I think that we should do the same with ours, to use that as an opportunity to educate the public on the everything that we're doing in county government. And I've just, before this meeting, was meeting with the sheriff and talking to him about this idea. And, even within the sheriff, that just saying law enforcement doesn't clearly communicate everything that goes on to help them better understand all the services. And, the money for the budget amendment's already been spent. It doesn't, harm public safety or the sheriff at all to let over and go through this process. I think if we're going to maintain that threshold of 20% reserves, that we need to respect that. And if we're gonna go below it, then we need to find other ways to make it up elsewhere, either, through revenue and all of us have experienced the public don't taxes, but the public needs to get their head around the fact that maybe we don't have enough revenue to provide all the services that we provide right now. And, that becomes part of that survey exercise that, when they understand what they're getting and that there's not an option to continue providing that same level of service without increasing taxes, maybe they'll come forward and say, well, then we would accept the tax increase. I think the mental health tax was a surprise to a lot of us, and maybe they'll feel otherwise. But all of this has to be driven, I think, by the public's public opinion and not necessarily just by ours. So that's what I'd like to see happen. And if anyone else has any thoughts, I'd like to hear them. Thanks.
I'll chime in right quick, Mr. Arena. I agree. The survey is a terrific idea that Mr. Salgado floated out there. During Finance Committee, Paul and I both cited that we've talked to our constituents and this is how they feel. And then Mr. Webster chimed up and he pointed out the fact that his constituents out there aren't as worried about public safety as we are in the more densely populated areas, that they're more concerned with the infrastructure. So I think it's probably not a bad idea to put a survey out there, at least figure out what it's going to cost to find out what the residents of the county are looking for out of what services they want us to maybe step up or not cut, or what maybe we can cut back on some more because of our budget constraints. I wish we had thought about this 2 or 3 months ago. This is very, very close to the budget cycle and coming up with the final numbers. I don't know that we'll be able to do a whole bunch with that information in this budget cycle, but I do think it's good information to get a hold of anyways. Anybody else have any comments about the Finance Committee report? Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Mr. Arena on this one. I think to lay this over would be a good idea. I'm for it. So I just want, I don't know, the numbers continue to increase as far as the revenue from the federal government on the number of federal inmates in our jail. So we've got to, if there's any positive, and I don't like to look at it like that, or I don't want to look at it as a for-profit, because that's absolutely not what I'm insinuating. But I just want everybody to keep in mind, and we really need to think this over and try to find sources the best way that uncover, turn over every rock and stone that we can to look for revenue in this. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mr. Booker. Anyone else on finance? If not, we'll move on to zoning. I don't see Mr. Webster on the call. I see he's got 4 items to be laid over and 1 resolution. Does anybody on zoning able to speak to that?
Well,
Mr.
we
Kelley.
just got I can speak to it. No, Mr. Kelley, you're welcome to.
Go ahead, Mr. Schultz. I don't care.
Mr.
All
Schultz.
right, yeah, Mr. Webster said that he may have trouble getting on the call. So the first item is a rezoning from ag to rural residential, and the next 3 items are all tied together. So those will be coming forward. We have a meeting tomorrow night to cover all of this. And then the final item is related to the potbelly pig and whether or not this will be sent to the ZBA. My understanding is if the zoning committee says yes, they should have a hearing, then that would be the next step. But it had to come before the committee first. So those are the items on the agenda.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for Mr. Schultz? Seeing none, we'll move on to economic development. Mr. Village.
Thank you, Chairman. We actually did not have any report. We will be looking to schedule a meeting. We have a couple other items that we're going to be looking at, smaller items, and one of them actually addressing a discussion point of how our office is run and helping out a little bit more with Chris and trying to make sure that he runs fluidly, and if we need to address the low staffing or whatever, just to kind of figure out if there's something that we can do and work around that. And then reopening the discussion with trying to figure out where our discussion with State's Attorney's Office to find out what's the status on the whole marijuana tax and how that's working about. So,
cool. Any questions from Mr. Village? Seeing none, we'll move to operations. Also has no report this week. There's a few things that we're talking about in the background, but nothing has already come to the committee. That leaves us at Public Works. Is anybody on Public Works that's willing to speak to the what's going on? Mr. Kelley, are you in tune with Public Works for this evening? Go ahead, Mr. Kelley.
Let me call up I have to call up the agenda.
If it would please you, I can read off the items if you're available to discuss them.
I am.
Okay. The first thing you have is a resolution authorizing an agreement with the state of Illinois motor fuel funds improvements on Perryville, Business 20. The next is a resolution rejecting bids for upgrading street with LEDs along various county highways. I guess I go one at a time. There's quite a few. If anybody wants to discuss the first two, anybody have questions on the first two? The next one is authorizing a bid for Belvedere Road, Meridian Road seal cracking. The next item is authorizing award to bid for Patterson Road resurfacing. After that is Kishwaukee resurfacing Meridian Road to Beltline. Resolution authorizing the purchase of an emulsion tank trailer mounted for $29,000. And a resolution authorizing execution of supplement number 1 to preliminary engineering services for the replacement of culverts on Gleesman Road. And that's it. Is there anything special we need to know about those, Mr. Kelley?
Maybe just that you might like to know that the whole idea of the tank for the emulsion stuff is to supplement the pothole patcher that we bought last year. And because they discovered that they would run out of emulsion, so it's good to have a tank going along with it so they don't have to go back to the yard.
Seems reasonable. Do you know why we're rejecting bids for the upgrading of streetlight fixtures with LEDs? Why are we rejecting that one? Do you happen to know?
Higher than estimated cost.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just my standard question about whether all of these items were budgeted.
Mr. Kelley, were these items budgeted?
I cannot answer that.
Hopefully we'll get a better answer for you at county board there, Mr. Schultz.
Obviously, bid rejection is not a problem.
Correct. The biggest one I see is the resurfacing Meridian Road for 1.225 million. And I would really like to know that answer.
I believe
we'll get him out of. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kelley? We'll move on then to public safety with Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. No report this week.
And personnel and policies. Is there anybody on that committee that can speak to the three resolutions for personnel and policies? And I can read them off. It would make it easier for someone. I see Mr. Arena come in. Yes, sir. Mr. Arena, please.
So, yeah, read them off for me, please.
I would be happy. The first is resolution authorizing the execution of agreement with Prime Therapeutics to provide pharmacy benefit management services.
Okay, so this, we had approved a, I don't know, some months back, a proposal for our insurance agent to look into this for us, and there was a cost that would be, passed on to the service provider that they eventually pick, and this is the one that was selected, and it would result in a savings that we've had from our previous contract. So it was, I don't think there was any opposition or no concerns about it.
Any questions about the pharmacy? On to the resolution for the county board authorizing execution of intergovernmental agreement with Boone County for animal control.
Oh, this is because Boone County had their staff resign. It's a short-term contract, just kind of a stopgap thing for them. And it, it wasn't going to be at a detriment to Winnebago County. It was, I guess they have a very low volume of service calls compared to us. So it fully funds itself, and it's just for a couple months.
Any questions from anybody about the Boone County Animal Control? See none, we'll move on to the last resolution authorizing an amendment to consultant agreement with Generations Healthcare Network, LLC.
So this one, I have some questions about now after we had the finance meeting with Baker Tilly. This is an amendment to an existing agreement we had to reduce the cost and the scope of services that they were providing. But if, and it was something I intended to try to talk to Mr. Fiducia about and just didn't have time. I believe the cost in this is like $30,000 a month. Is that correct?
I don't have that in front of me, but that does sound right.
Okay, so
it was reduced from
50 to 30. And I questioned the amount that we were spending on it during committee. And, they said that it's a necessary service. We should have it. They provide, help that we need. We were paying, I guess, $50,000, which again, to me sounds like an awful lot. But the concern comes up during the presentation by Baker Tilly. They said that we're not properly billing. And that would seem like a fundamental function of the nursing home. And if we're paying a consultant that much money, that I don't think we should be hearing that we're not doing timely billing. So I want to get clarity on that. And if that's actually been occurring, I would question whether this service provider is the right service provider. And like I said, I did not have a chance to connect with Mr. Fiducia about it, but I'll try to do it before the before county board, or encourage any of you, to also do the same.
Sure, I see Mr. Schultz has a question. Mr. Schultz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, Mr. Arena, the audit that we just heard about was for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2019. And so it's 11 months ago. So they were raising that comment, and then under the management response for that item, they were saying that they were doing better now. Now, I still think it's a good question, to ask and make sure that are they in fact doing a better job and getting the detail on that. But the fact that it was 11 months ago that year end closed was, I think, a relevant point here.
Right, but this same consultant was in place during that period of time for a higher dollar amount. So they were handling a larger scope of services. I don't know, I just would like to hear an explanation to that point. And before I vote yes on it, I just want to be clear that nobody dropped the ball, I guess.
And I think it might almost be appropriate to lay it over for a meeting until we have the answers, questions and answers.
Right. So I'll check with Mr. Fiducia as soon as I can to make sure I understand the circumstances correctly.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, if I may, you know, one of the stunning things that came out in that audit report was the fact that we were lending money from the general fund to the tune of over 3.3 million as of the end of this last fiscal year to the River Bluff nursing home because they had a negative cash in their balance sheet. And that was driven in part by what Mr. Arena is talking about. In large part, they had this huge receivable that they have not collected. And by not billing, they were not putting themselves in a position where they could collect that huge receivable. But the other thing that the auditors commented on is, okay, over $3 million of the 4 point something net assets for River Bluff is tied up in their property, plant, and equipment. And so when you pull that out, they were upside down in terms of their negative cash. It's just a bad situation. And that was 11 months ago. And so one of the things that I did not mention at the last finance committee, but I'm going to be asking for is, what's the update in terms of how much the nursing home is having to borrow from the general fund because they're in a negative cash position? If it was negative 3.3 million almost a year ago, and we've been hearing some really bad news more recently with COVID, then the potential is for that negative cash to be more significant. Why this all matters is we already have our challenges in terms of dipping into our reserves. But if some of those reserves, in addition to the fact that they're being drawn down, are being tied up by other funds like the River Bluff Nursing Home, then our need to borrow is going to get accelerated. We're going to have to borrow sooner, basically. So it's a significant concern.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's right.
Mr. Kelley.
Thank you, Chairman. I asked the chairman years ago why we are in the nursing home business.
Thank you, Mr. Kelley. Any other comments? Questions? Anything else for the good of the order? How about a motion to adjourn?
So,
Westcott, Ms. Crosby, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
We have adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
And a wonderful job that